She said she was kidnapped by a man with a gun and held hostage for hours last Thursday night. But Michigan police now say 18-year-old Haley Turner made it all up. And now she could face felony charges for filing a false report. Her 16-hour disappearance prompted a massive police search that spanned 2 counties. Let's bring in Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor, and Doug Burns, a criminal defense attorney. Welcome, gentlemen. It's interesting because I think, first of all, she's facing the charges, but she also cost taxpayers there a lot of money.
Right. The money's important, but even more important than that, she put people at risk. There was a helicopter as part of this search. There were federal law enforcement agencies, state law enforcement agencies. They were diverted, presumably from other law enforcement activity. So there's a real public safety risk when someone makes a false report. Also, sometimes false reports lead to arrests of innocent people. It didn't happen here, but that's another danger when this happens.
Doug, how do you defend somebody who's been in this?
Well, you remember Jennifer Wilbanks, the runaway bride?
Sure.
Similar situation. She made false claims. You know, basically, I think the defense is some mitigation. In other words, you know, you don't need to throw the book at every single person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a felony. It doesn't necessarily have to involve prison time. However, I think the likely outcome, Ed, would probably be a misdemeanor, some restitution for some of the expenses of overtime and so on. I mean, I don't think she should get off scot-free, but what I'm saying is we don't need to throw the book at her.
What do you think, prosecutor? Are we going to throw the book or not?
I agree that she doesn't have to serve prison time for this, but there has to be some kind of prosecution. She should have some kind of conviction, as Doug said, maybe a misdemeanor with probation. You need to send the message to the wider community that if you make a false report, there's going to be consequences. You don't just get to say at the end, no, I made it up, and then move on with your life, because as I said before, it puts a lot of people at risk. And fortunately, no one was arrested here, but what if someone was, and we've seen innocent people go to jail? It all starts with a false report, or a lot of them do, and we can't allow that to happen without any consequence.
He's tough.
He wants to put it behind bars.
No, she doesn't have to go to jail, but there should be at least some kind of prosecution. A misdemeanor with probation might be appropriate here. We need to know what the motivation was.
And Doug, he makes a fair point about there seems to have been a spate of these. You mentioned the runaway bride. Is there a copycat nature here? People see this in the media and say, I want to get my 15 minutes.
Well, you know, the way you break that down is, you know, you punish crime for different reasons. You know, punishment, retribution, but there's also deterrence, and that's what he's talking about. So in other words, we want to deter people from seeing somebody do this and, as Dan said, just get away with it. So I think it's a middle ground analysis. We do want to deter, but we don't necessarily want to, you know, ratchet up our prison population any further on this type of thing.
And she clearly needs some kind of help. There was some kind of psychological problem here, we presume, because if you're well adjusted and everything's happy in your life, you're not going to make up a kidnapping. So she does need some kind of intervention, which she could get through probation.
You talked about deterrence. So how do you do that?
Well, deterrence, it's funny, Ed, is a two-pronged thing. One is to deter the particular person from doing more crimes, but that's less important. The other one is to deter those who are watching. So in a case that particularly gets media attention, we do want viewers to say, oh, wow, did you see that, honey? She made up that she was kidnapped and she got convicted of a crime. I mean, there is an element of deterrence to that, but Dan also alluded to something else, which is a sort of a psychiatric backstory, not necessarily related to law. Are you trying to get attention? Are you trying to rebel? You know, it's hard to say. So along those lines, she should also get some kind of treatment.
How do you do that now with social media? Folks see a case like this, maybe they want to, as I say, copycat. What do you think about deterrence? How do you deal with it?
Well, there has to be some kind of law enforcement intervention. If the next story is that she's been arrested and maybe pled guilty and is getting probation, at least other people who are thinking of copycat crimes or copycat made-up abductions.
That's going to send a signal.
They'll say, look, that woman got arrested. Her life is scarred because she has this conviction. If people see her just move scot-free away from this, other people will say, you know, I could do that too, get a lot of media attention, and there's no real problem for me at the end, except maybe
what do you say to that, scot-free, Burns?
Well, it's a tricky calculus. It's like when somebody runs onto a baseball field. You know, you say, don't put the camera on him, you know, or her. So it's the same thing here. I mean, I agree with Dan. Look, somebody shouldn't get all kinds of media attention and then have the public walk away with it. Oh, she did that stunt, got away with it. It does go down a road toward more leniency, but Mr. Defense Lawyer Broken Record, we don't have to throw the book at her. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with that. Let's get her help and also send a message to the wider community that this can't happen.
I think she just wanted her 15 minutes. Dan wants to give her 15 years.
No,
you know, no, okay,
that's a good one.
We're going a little farther.
Probation's okay.
All right, Dan, Doug, appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Ed.
Good to see you.